So we know there are 5 types of vertebrates: fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. We've talked about fish and amphibians. Today we're going to talk about reptiles and birds. So reptiles, when you think of those, you're thinking of turtles, snakes, crocodiles, alligators. Those are some examples of reptiles. So some of the traits that they share: they are covered in dry, hard scales. So we know fish were covered in scales, but the reptile scales and the fish scales aren't the same. So reptile scales, they're hard. Think about lizards too. What they do is they're covered in a waxy substance. So if you've ever touched a snake, they're a little waxy, or touched a turtle, they feel a little waxy. That helps protect their insides from drying out. So that kind of helps trap in some moisture. All reptiles lay eggs, so they don't have live birth, they lay eggs. Reptiles are cold-blooded. So like our fish and like our amphibians, they depend on their surroundings to control their body temperature. And reptiles have lungs, so they breathe through lungs. Their life cycle, they're an egg, and then when it hatches, it's a hatchling, and then they turn into an adult. We also are going to talk about birds. So birds come in all shapes, they come in all sizes. I'm sure you've seen lots of birds. Birds are my least favorite of the groups of animals. I would rather see an alligator than have a bird near me. I hate birds. Anyway, there are some really pretty birds. There are some birds that aren't so pretty. But all birds have some traits. They are all covered in feathers. Birds are the only animal to be covered in feathers. So if you see an animal and it has feathers, it's a bird. Birds have wings. Most birds use those wings for flying, but there are some birds that don't fly. So even if a bird isn't able to fly, like an ostrich, it's too big and too heavy for them to be able to fly their bodies off the ground. So they don't fly, but they still have wings. Birds have 2 legs. So the legs can be used for walking, they can be used for running, they can be used for swimming. So an ostrich can't fly, but it can run sometimes faster than a horse. So they can still get places really quickly. Birds lay eggs, so they have a hard covering or a shell. Birds are warm-blooded, so their body is not dependent on the temperature around them. They regulate their own body temperature. Birds have beaks or bills, and the type of beak, it's an adaptation that they have. Normally, you can kind of tell what they eat by the type of beak that they have. So if you think about a pelican's beak, it's like flat on the top, and then it swoops way down. We know when pelicans eat, they dip into the water and scoop up a lot, and they hopefully have fish there. So that's why their beak has a big place to scoop water. Well, not every bird is going to have that, because not every bird's going to need that adaptation to eat. All birds also breathe with lungs. So birds have lungs. They are our first type that is warm-blooded that we've learned about.